Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this online webinar titled Fundamentals of Energy Savings Performance Contracting in Texas, in the state of Texas. I'm Fred Yabram with the Texas State Energy Conservation Office. I'm an engineer, and our office, SECO is the short for the State Energy Conservation Office. We work with local governments, public schools, state agencies, universities to provide technical assistance and funding to reduce utility energy and water costs and maximize energy efficiency. I'm also the public sector co-chair of the Texas chapter of the Energy Services Coalition. If you have not heard of us, we've been around for a few years. It's a partnership that SECO got into with the network of public-private sector experts engage in promoting, adopting energy efficiency building upgrades through the concept of guaranteed energy savings performance contracting. This webinar, as you can see in the agenda, is hosted by SECO, but also from the Texas chapter of the Energy Coalition and the National Association of State Energy Officials. So the agenda includes a national expert on energy services, energy savings performance contracting, but it also includes a brief case study by one of our state agencies, the Texas Facilities Commission, on the implementation of energy savings performance contracting. And we have the energy and engineering manager of the Texas Facilities Commission to give us a brief outline on the case study. His name is Farshad Shah Savari. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Sam, who will introduce our speaker. Sam.
Great. Thanks so much, Fred. Really appreciate the pass off here. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Sam Kramer. I am a program director with the National Association of State Energy Officials, and I'm really pleased to be able to help bring you this training. I'd like to quickly introduce the lead facilitator for this training, Dale Haas. He presently serves as a technical assistance provider for the Energy Services Coalition State Technical Liaison Team, supported by a cooperative agreement with the United States Department of Energy. Aside from his active role with ESC, Dale continues to support the continuous improvement of the nation's compendium of best practices, tools, resources, instruments, and guides around performance contracting. Prior to this role, Dale was a member of the leadership team of an ESCO for over a decade and has been engaged with energy efficiency, providing client solutions for over 30 years. We've had the tremendous pleasure to work with Dale in several capacities in the past, and we're really excited to be able to bring him here as he has got all the information about ESPC you could possibly want to know, and he's going to try and share it with you as fast as he can in the next hour. Dale, are you there?
As Sam mentioned, and I'm always reminded of the Smokey and the Bandit line, we have a long way to go and a short time to get there. So thanks for the introductions, and apologies to all of our attendees for the brief technical glitch. I am going to do my best to cover a great deal of information in a short period of time, and we certainly hope that it is successful and informative for you as we broach the topic of fundamentals of ESPC in Texas. So the Energy Services Coalition, which I'm a part of, is a national nonprofit. It really is a group of individuals, those folks being enjoined to promote the concept of paid for by performance projects. And if you don't know me very well, you'll find out very quickly that I will not be reading these slides. So I'm going to entrust you with that, and I'll touch on the highlighted portions that I think make good sense for us. One of the big parts about the Energy Services Coalition, as Fred mentioned, are the local chapters. And Texas proudly hosts one of the great ESC chapters in the nation, where they're continuing outreach and education around the state. sometimes electronically, and moving to more and more in person. So we always want to start with a definition. What is this thing we talk about being performance contracting? This definition is from 1998. I know that sounds odd, but that's when it's from. The use of guaranteed savings from existing budgets to make upgrades. Over the course of time, I tried to share with people a host of other definitions to think about, and they're always proffered by this concept. You know what? You're going to spend this money. It's part of your budgets. So it either goes to the utility company in the form of inefficiency paid for, or you reinvest it, continue to invest in your own facilities. Some other definitions, repurposing those dollars to fix stuff. Well, that's important. Save energy, water, create jobs, also important. Legislatively empowered, equally an important concept to know that there is a statute that supports this concept in all 50 states, but of course in Texas. And finally, my utopian perspective, a debt-free modernization of public facilities and system infrastructure, said in that way to reinforce a couple of things. Number one, yes, there will be the payback of an upfront loan, but there will also be an accompanying reduction in cost to utility. Those offsetting resources should have always blended for a debt-free modernization and following the standards of each owner. Very important, critically important to recognize that this animal that we call performance contracting doesn't create its own quality standards. It builds to the standards of your institution. So that always leaves a couple of unanswered questions. You know what? Is it a means of finance? Well, it is, in that we repay an upfront financial commitment. That's a fact. But it does not provide the upfront financing. And one of the real concerns is, as we all reach for tools and resources, we can easily get attached to the energy.gov sites that talk about federal projects empowered by a different statute where the ESCO actually brings the money. And that's created confusion around the nation. Performance contracting today in state and local governments does not bring the money. That is, in fact, a separate instrument, which in Texas could be Lone Star funds, direct appropriations, and a host of other financial instruments. ESPC is a means of competitive procurement. Important. So are we going to bid this job? Well, no, we don't know what the scope is. What we would be bidding, what we would be competitively soliciting are markups, margins on services to be provided, and therefore all the pricing enters into a transparent, open book style environment. ESPC is a means of contracting as well. Single source. Now, I always like to call that one-stop shop. A friend of mine on the East Coast says it's one throat to choke. I don't know if that's a fair way to say it, but it is all about being a single responsible individual, no finger pointing from one resource to another. You know, there are a lot of new names, new words, new jargon in the energy efficiency industry. I've plastered a number of them on the screen for you to see. You know, what's interesting about that is we're going to talk about one of them. We're going to talk about guaranteed energy savings performance contracting for a couple of reasons. And to help you think that stuff through, I'll point you to these considerations. Number one, if you're looking at anything besides performance contracting as defined by the statute in Texas, then you need to know what statute defines the transaction. Maybe you do need to bid it if it's one of those other creative resource mechanisms. What means of procurement is required? And here are some others. Who owns the improvement? Who owns the risk of performance? Is the financing debt? Is there a non-appropriations clause included, which is one of the ultimate safeguards in the enabling legislation for performance contracting in all 50 states? Subsequently, whose process should I follow? If this is not a tried and true 50-year history process, how do I know what to follow? What if I want to terminate this concept? Who's going to review the contract? Who's seen it? Is the upfront financing debt? Can I still use my construct? All of these are the sorts of considerations for public folks to consider. Now, if you're a private entity joining us today and you own your facility outright, you use any method to modernize it that you wish. These are remarks intended for public sector folks being entrusted as public stewards of public funds. So switching gears a little bit, why would I use ESPC anyway? Well, let's start with that one. No money. I just don't have enough money. I have lots of things to do, but I don't have enough money. Where am I going to get it from? Well, I could sit and wait year over year over year over year and hope it rains funds from the legislature, or I can figure out how to optimize my existing budget, being a great steward, and therefore leverage those inefficiencies to help me use performance contracting. I may have some energy goals that I've been tasked with. Lots of cities around the nation have sustainability goals or carbon reduction goals or energy consumption goals. Well, in many cases, those are unfunded concepts. Leveraging performance contracting may be a way to help you meet your energy goals. Environmental targets that I mentioned, GHG attainments, how you want to manage those. Again, another great financial resource to meet targets. Creating local jobs, not national jobs, jobs in your community, using your subcontractors in your institutions. Failing facility and system infrastructure, it's just falling apart. You know, baling wire and duct tape is sort of the common comments about how things are held together in some facilities. If that's you and you're looking for a way out, this is a way to leverage inefficiency to build, to modernize. Not to build new, by the way, but to modernize and retrofit existing measures in your facility. Maybe you have a need for resilience. Wow, that bullet seems all the more important these days. I know as a part of our recent past collectively, we're in the same service area in many ways, you and I too lost power over some period of time based on some dramatic things happening across the nation with temperatures. Our need for resilience, the ability to separate myself and continue to operate and fulfill my primary mission, important. Why would I provide that resilience solution until I was as efficient as I can be? That's a head scratcher. Don't know why. Leveraging, simply maximizing the value of each dollar. So there's a standing presumption that we always make when we talk about performance contracting. If you have all the money and all the time in the world and ample expertise, just do this yourself. Which raises the question, if you have all the money and all the time and ample expertise, why haven't you done it? So in the earliest principles of performance contracting, this is where we started. I need a bunch of stuff replaced, fixed, but I do not have the money, time, or expertise to do it. And that's sort of met up with, hey, look, I've got the stuff that saves energy and money, but you really don't have the confidence it'll deliver the predicted results, at least enough to buy it and have it installed. Well, that created a model that looked just like this. The ESCO bought it, installed it, and you paid them month by month as the savings were realized, and the savings were reconciled to your bills. Truth is, in that first/earliest model, the ESCO community didn't get paid until the savings was achieved. Now I call that the ultimate guarantee of performance. No loans, no liens, no debt, limited risk, if any. That was then. The concept has expired. For a host of reasons, you can't find that product any longer. What we've developed into is something that looks more like this. The financing of the projects moves to a solicitation for best value third party, still charging the finance cost and fees to the project, but that concept is separated from the ESCO providing the money. That it typically requires a separate finance solution or an agreement. In the tax-exempt lease purchase model, which is the most nationally used, the public entity holds the title. In other words, even though you're still paying a monthly fee, annual fee, semi-annual fee, however your payback is structured, the title, the security interest is transferred to the public sector up front. That's an important detail that folks don't necessarily know how to pay attention to. That's why the model was created in that fashion. The proof of savings, the actual teeth of the guarantee in guaranteed energy savings performance contracting, is moved to a concept called measurement and verification. Prove to me scientifically, measure, verify, produce a report, show me, let me witness, all that stuff comes into play, prove to me, and then reconcile to my utility bill that those savings are achieved. And if they're not, I'm going to rely on the private sector to support me if it's some failure that they've created by making up those budget shortfalls. Now, I point this out. Beware the pretext that there's really no point in M&V since things always change in facilities. And what that is intended to actually relay below it is the actual science of M&V truly is designed to resolve that issue. So the pretext that there's no point in M&V is a bad one. So then came along a new wrinkle. It was actually July 21 of 2010. Dodd-Frank said that, well, the ESCOs really can't bring the money. Now that's in state and local projects. Again, if you're internet searching and you're trying to understand how performance contracting works, you may see federal explanations about federal energy management programs using a concept called the indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity contract that says the ESCOs bring the money. That's only in the federal government applications. In state and local government, as you are, the ESCO is precluded by this federal law, the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act, from bringing the money and even actually making recommendations on best financier or best consideration. You need to look to a registered municipal advisor where you typically get your financial guidance for those sorts of scenarios and assistance. The lowest rate today when you go get money is still likely a securitized transaction. Dale, what does that mean? Well, it means that if you're borrowing money from someone, what they really want you to do is they want you to allow them a fundamental mortgage of your facility or a security interest in the things that they're installing so that should you fail to pay the bill, they could legally go pull those devices out. Not that that ever happens, but it certainly is a consideration. The lowest possible rate requires that. Are there non-securitized transactions in the nation? Yes, there are. So other principles here, we want you to be aware of the fact that projects are a partnership opportunity where the owner and the ESCO really are working together. If you don't start out a project in that the owner and the ESCO are both trying to really reach the same goals, to modernize the facilities, to be as efficient as possible while still solving the institution's problems. Maybe those are cold or hot spots, or in today's world, maybe you recognize you need more fresh air in your facility. Well, okay, more fresh air in the facility may actually cost you more money to condition that fresh air. On the other hand, making your facility more efficient may provide the headroom for you to increase that outside air component. All work should be required to meet or exceed the standards of the institution or the owner, if you will. Should not be any question about that. You as owners attending this webinar need to be empowered with that concept. As a fundamental principle, meet or exceed your standards, your comfort requirements, fix the stuff on your list. The operating conditions notice standards of comfort can't be sacrificed for efficiency. Wow, I'm sure I can save you money. Let's just make it 85 degrees in your building all summer. Well, that doesn't make any sense at all. you lose productivity. It becomes an unworkable environment. So you need to establish what those standards of comfort are, create a small range, and ensure that the project meets them for temperature, humidity, light levels, and so on and so forth. The savings should pay for the obligations each and every year for that year. No such thing really of passing excess savings from one year to cover a shortfall for another. It doesn't make any sense. Other important considerations, always refer to your enabling legislation. You know, for Texas, we're going to provide for you the statute links. They're on the SECO website, but we want to make sure that nothing can be done in your project that would conflict with the enabling legislation for Texas. The language within the proposal provided to you, the investment grade audit, or the contract itself, all the schedules, all the appendices, none of that should conflict or supersede your enabling statute. From time to time, we see that language pop up in paper and it creates a conflict that has to be sorted out later. No point in doing that. Just start out front with the managed expectation that those conflicts will not be allowed. You know, when you consider doing this, from time to time, we hear people say, well, just pick a champion and get started. To that, I say, bad idea. Pick a champion, have that champion really surround themselves with this team of folk. The energy folk, the legal folk, finance, procurement. I mean, the finance people are going to need to commit to full-term budgeting for you. If your utility bill begins to go down and your budgeting authority says, hey, these guys are doing a great job, let's reduce next year's budget for utility. And all of a sudden you're scratching your head going, now I don't know how to repay the note for the upfront financing. That'd be a problem. So they need to be on board. Procurement needs to understand how devices are going to be selected, how they're going to be procured, that this whole concept is legal and applicable based on the enabling statute. The maintenance team should be aware of a project being assembled like this so that they can contribute what needs to be done. What have we been having trouble with? And oh, by the way, if you're thinking about installing that combined heat and power plant, we're going to need some training. You're going to have to bring us up to speed so that we can, in fact, maintain it if you elect to take on that responsibility. The construction folks in your institution, you know what, if you're going to try to meet the standards that have always existed in your facility, because you do inherit that work, of course, then you need to make sure that those folks are engaged in the decision-making as well. Now in Texas, for state agencies, there's a requirement that there's an oversight review of the investment grade audit. I think that's grand. Frankly, nationally, we're pressing hard to go another step. We're working in a very close way with a whole host of national resources to try to bring about a concept of third-party oversight from beginning, from cradle to grave, if you will, throughout the entire process to make sure that qualified resources are always available for you to have for oversight. And finally on that team, approving authorities. All those folks, legal, finance, all of them need to be engaged. Why would you go through the process of developing a project? Maybe it's a multi-million-dollar solution for your institution, and then take it to someone and say, hey, I'd like for you to look at this and approve it. And they, well, I don't understand this at all. Why would we be thinking about doing this? I had another plan for it. Those folks should equally be engaged. So whose paper should I use? And we think this is so important that we spend time talking about it in virtually every webinar. Folks don't naturally have contracts to support all sorts of construction methodologies. In your state, in Texas, there are some standardized procurement contracts for construction and guidance in state agencies. I encourage you to look at those. Once again, they're on the SECO website. If you don't have any for your institution, well, you'll need a source. And year over year, month after month, time after time, webinar after webinar, somebody will say, well, if I want to look at somebody's sample paper, who should I look to? Of course, I would say look to Texas. We hear folks ask that question. I always say, well, wait, Which state has the same constitution, enabling legislation, and all the standards that you have in your institution? Look to them and see if they have a sample for you. Well, that doesn't make any sense at all. You won't find those folks. So we do want you to know that there are some model documents on the ESC website that really cover this entirely. Now, just to bring more credibility to that paper, the Energy Services Coalition and its resources didn't write those instruments. We reviewed the states being the most successful in the nation and put together tenets from each of those states into these model documents so that they could be customized for your institution or state as required. So how do I get ready to do this? Well, you're going to probably need 3 months of utility bills. Recently, I was reminded that last year was not normal, lest we forget that. Last year was very abnormal. And for many of us, we abandoned or considerably left our institutions, our office spaces, our workspaces and learning spaces for long periods of time. Now, would you want to use that year of utility data to try to help you find a normal year, an aggregate of 3 normal years so that you could determine what baseline of consumption you really operate at? Well, no, you wouldn't want to do that. So 3 normal months of utility bills would be required. And this really is important that it includes all the utilities that'll be affected. So anytime you consume, there is a utility, and each year, each month, you likely get a bill, and all of those are different. They have different rate structures, they have different riders, they may have demand charges on them, different tariffs that construct them. You need to see this stuff, and frankly, you need to understand it before you try to rely on it to provide you with the savings that you'll look to later to support the payment of the work of the project. And I always offer this before you go off to the storage facility to dig up the file cabinets with 36, 48 months of bills. You might want to contact your utility representative because they likely have some spreadsheets that they can share with you that show you what your consumption is. And then you only need sample bills from each of those utilities to illustrate the tariffs. You know, we posted this little concept here. I want to draw your attention to it. For more insights, check out GESPCU. We created this thing called Guaranteed Energy Savings Performance Contracting University. And frankly, it's received quite a deal of acclaim. There are 25 short podcast lessons that you can walk through and really get a deeper dive of all of these concepts in hopes that all of us, before we engage in working in an energy efficiency project, have the best foundation of knowledge possible. So we're going to spend 50 minutes together. There's another 4 hours out there. We think you'll find that quite helpful. Sample utility bills, understanding your utility bills, all important stuff. You really can't make an energy reduction in a tax or a fixed rider. So you need to understand what you will be impacting with efficiency on your bill. Be prepared to provide some technical facility information. So here's a short list. These model documents contain a whole host of things: square footage, drawings, descriptions, what I need fixed, what I'd like to have fixed, what I was planning on having fixed, all that stuff. And once again, lesson 109, if you will, of GESPCU can help flesh out those thoughts for you and why this is so critically important. All right, so how do I pick partners to do this work? Well, number one, you heard me say, and I'll reinforce again, I love this concept of finding an owner's representative. There's a couple handfuls of them today. We think by the end of this year, there will be processes in place to extend that to a whole burgeoning industry. where folks will actually be trained in the concept of being owners' representatives for this type of work. Incredibly important concept to have those sorts of allies available. So if you're going to pick them, when would you need them? Always. How can they help with virtually everything? You know, they can help you with trying to understand what the project's capable of doing, how big you think the project might be. They can help you try to make bright selections about the concepts that you want to change, about the teams that you want to employ to help you with those. You know, lots of rhetoric here. How will you pay for them? How will you find them? All important information. How do you pick the partner that you call the energy services company or the ESCO? How do you select one? Can you just look at their references sheet and say that's good enough? Should you maybe engage in oral interviews with the people that'll actually be doing the work? You know, as Sam mentioned very briefly, I was a part of one of those companies, and yeah, we did a great job of trying to tee up a marketing team with all the resources that illustrated the best of what we could do and how we could do it. Completely different than asking the folk who's going to be your project manager on site to tell you how he'd manage a site interruption where you actually needed to be in the facility that they were working in. How will you handle that, sir or ma'am? Please tell me now before I make a selection. You know, the other thing that's really important on this list is the comfort factor. For almost every state in the nation, you'll find that there are 10, 15 or so, maybe 20 folks that are providing these sorts of services every day, day in, day out. You should meet them. You should interview at least some of them. You should understand how they do their business. And frankly, you should be comfortable with them. You should agree that these are the kind of folks you'd want to have in your facilities. They're the kind of folks you want to work with for the next couple of years during this construction and design phase, but then for the following 10, 15, maybe 20 years in this performance period where you're actually proving together that the project is meeting its goals of paying for itself. Well, then there's the financier. How do I pick those? Well, you know, that's sometimes really challenging. Do you just go to your local bank? We certainly want you to look at the Texas resources. And in fact, once again, on the resources we'll provide for you, there's a set of information from the SECO website about financial availability and support resources. One, of course, many of you know, is the Lone Star program. That revolving loan fund has done a great job of supporting Texas efficiency modernization over time. When do you bring them on board? Sort of a critical question. In many cases, it seems that the owners and maybe even the ESCOs let that slip to very end. Let's get the whole project developed and then we'll go find the money. I encourage you to recognize that's a bad idea. The professional financiers in the world know how to help you think through when you might need money. Variable ways of having the fund source go to an escrow account that might be really helpful for you. Considerations on the marketplace. I think the indicative rates are going up or they may be going down. Those people that live in that profession can be really helpful for you. You don't need them every day, but engage them early and then know them as a resource for your project. Other considerations. Well, you know, when you think about investment grade audits, there's a real fundamental there that occurs. In the nation today, some people say, well, you know, an investment grade audit, that's how I prepare a proposal for you. Once again, I'd say that's a bad idea. An investment grade audit is a professional study of your systems, devices, and resources that you're currently using that can develop over time a proposal of what you might elect to replace, modernize, and how you'll prove that those savings would be achieved. It is a quite technical instrument. And I've personally read some investment grade audits that I had to reread the same paragraph 5 times to try to understand what it said. I believe that's a real shame. you should demand that not only the technical information be there, but readability also be provided so that you and your supervising authorities can read an explanation of these elegant and sophisticated mathematical computations and what they really mean, what assumptions they're based on, what risk they create. I always say, if a third grade math teacher could read an IGA and understand where the savings was going to come from, you've created and delivered a great product. You should describe your scenario prior to construction at unbelievable detail, with pictures, documented, with all sorts of measurements. You only get one time to document what the project looked like before you began construction or any retrofits. Wow. You may need that pre-project description down the road to sort out any discrepancies or disagreements you have about where the savings are coming from. Be sure it's done well. I often hear from the private sector, I really don't need this load study. I don't need to know how much of my electrical bill goes to lighting and how much goes to pumps and fans. Really? I'll tell you when you need that is when you think you haven't achieved the savings that you had planned for. When do you get to do that? Now, before you construct the project. How do you create a load study after you've constructed the project? Only with art, no science then exists. So we encourage you, get those load studies done, make them a part of the investment grade audit. Standards of comfort, all these pieces and parts listed here are important ingredients to an investment grade audit. And once again, we thought this was so important that we have multiple lessons on topic at GESPCU, and strongly encourage you to take those 15-minute, 10-minute segments, listen to them, try to understand what they're providing as a deeper dive to these considerations. Additional information, each measure, each thing that you're going to retrofit needs to be defined in great detail. I often have people say, well, I'm going to replace a 300-ton chiller. Well, that's a great idea. In my mind, it becomes a question of how much pipe does that include? Which valves? What monitoring? Will it include a new housekeeping pad? Does it, in fact, dispose of the old one? All the scopes of the measure need to be included so that you have a clear definition of expectations of the work that will be done. Investment grade audit should include all these plans, startup plans, commissioning plans, measurement and verification, and they're different. Please recognize they're different. When someone lumps them and says, well, we're going to do them all at the same time, they're all about the same. You need to reread the instruments that guide the industry. Understanding projected savings and guaranteed savings and the actual difference between them too. Projected savings, I have a friend, long-standing friend, been an engineer forever, and he said, in the world today, we really don't project savings. We're really calculating savings. We're calculating savings out to the 5th decimal point. Okay, I agree. That is what you're doing. Are you going to guarantee the savings out to the 5th? No. There will be a safety factor, a diversity factor that says, we can't control everything. So maybe for some ESCOs, that's 80%. Maybe for some it's higher, maybe for some lower. You need to understand that as a part of this concept. Then there's the concept of operation and maintenance savings. I say that the only things that you should be counting on as savings are things that you can document by paper, put in a file, and refer to later. Again, we encourage you, go back, make sure you're familiar with the Texas statute, the enabling legislation on performance contracting, and see how these concepts apply to you. Know that the investment grade audit includes a measurement and verification plan. Sometimes I hear people say, well, we really can't produce that now. We have to wait until we finish construction because we don't know what changes will occur. Wow. That's like saying, I'm going to move in, I'm going to rent an apartment in this building, and I think I'll live there for a year or so, and then I'd like to see the lease. Not a good idea. Make sure there's a measurement and verification plan included in your investment grade audit. Finally, after all the science is collected, then you get a project proposal. And it includes things like the measures, a construction plan, a commissioning plan, an M&V plan, an M&V plan with the options, the term of time that it's going to be included, the pricing, the cost of the M&V. Sometimes I hear people say, I understood that my construction is supposed to be cost plus, but I don't know how to get a price for this M&V. Here's the secret. Ask. Ask for it. Ask for a price. How many hours is it going to take? What equipment are you going to install? How many times will you be on site? What time do you imagine it'll take you to produce the report? Understand the price of M&V. That's when you know that it's providing value for you. And who holds risk? Wow, the ever important question. If someone installs something for me, I'm a public facility, it's most likely that I am going to manage it. I am going to maintain it. I'm going to be responsible for it. Well, then who holds that risk? Well, maybe I do, but I'm going to demand that the ESCO tell me what those procedures are. And I would encourage them to check up on me regularly just to see that I'm performing them. In a partnership, neither party wants to sacrifice energy efficiency savings based on something as simple as maintenance procedures. Other things included in the proposal should be the guaranteed savings, that diversity or safety factor, clear and evident pricing that you could research if you want to, that you could contrast with other construction projects that you've done in your time. Don't be shy about making sure you feel that you have great value in the project. On the other hand, recognize that a performance contract is a one-stop shop. So design as well as implementation and performance are all included in the cost of this work. Just need to be privy to that fact that it's all wrapped together. In a traditional appropriated project, you may have had money that went to an architect, separate money that went to an engineer. Then you bid the project and had a general contractor, subcontractors, bought stuff, and then you may have had a commissioning agent. All the costs need to be wrapped into the one performance contracting project. Then you know you have great value. The price should be a guaranteed maximum price. By that, in the fundamentals of these projects, we want you to understand they're paid for by savings. That means you can't exceed the savings that the project will create. So there's always a maximum. On the other hand, as I'm often reminded by smart end users, gee, I got involved in buying some LED fixtures and the price just kept going down and down. Before I actually received them, I don't even know what the price was. Hey, look, it's a guaranteed maximum price. That doesn't mean it's a guaranteed minimum price. Ensure that the relationship you have with your ESCO provides you clear and open transparency as to what things cost and subsequently what is a fair price to pay for them. Should there be bids? Well, there might be for devices and for subcontractors. There won't be for ESCOs. There's just not. It's an undefined quantity of services, and so it is predicated on those markups, as I mentioned earlier. Assembling reasonability. Wow. How do you assess that? Well, you can base it to some degree on the history of what, as an example, an energy management system point costs have been in the past, or chillers per ton in the past. But you do need to recognize those other services that are included. And hey, ask for them to be broken out so that you can assess reasonability. I always encourage people, if you don't feel there's great value in the proposal that's been presented to you, don't move forward. Pay for the study and move on. In that fashion, we find literally billions of dollars of this work being done successfully every year with clients that are just delighted at a one-stop resource and fair and reasonable pricing, high value. Your proposal should also include a cash flow pro forma, and that should be an illustration that what you're paying out in money is covered by those savings as calculated by your ESCO partner. Then there's the contract itself, the ESPC, and I'm going to kind of jump through this pretty quickly, but it includes everything, all the terms and conditions. Where do you get terms and conditions for a construction project if you're a public entity? Well, you already have them. Make sure they're applied. You should understand order of precedent, defining the purchase of services, all of these different things. You should recognize the need for a non-appropriations clause if you do, in fact, need one. How hazardous waste will be managed. The responsibilities of the parties through every step of the project. Now, in the model documents, we have all these crazy schedules laid out for you. And I'm going to flip through them here just very quickly because we want you to know that there are copies of all this material and it guides that all these things should be included in a performance contract for you. Lots and lots of, imagine having an alternate dispute resolution procedure in the contract before you started. Well, okay, if we're going to get sideways, or as a friend of mine would say, if we're going to get married, let's understand how to get divorced. I'm not sure that's a great concept for marriage, but it's a good one for contracts like these. The exhibits, the performance and payment bond that's required, what a certificate acceptance will look like, and on and on. And finally, as a part of implementation, you need to understand this process about submittals, notice to proceed, commissioning, safety, insurance, who owns what and when the warranty starts. All the questions that you've relied on a traditional construction process to manage for you for the last 50 years, you need to make sure are a part of this. In fact, if you're an institution, I encourage you to look to your construction contract and have it be added to these documents as a schedule so that you have consistent construction guidance for your work. Other processes that you need to be considering: how will invoicing be done? You know, you didn't have to worry about that before, but this is a new process. So either you're using the one that's stereotypical from your construction processes in your institution, or you need to make sure that they are very, very clear with you and your ESCO before you get started. How you'll complete the project, who signs off on what if we disagree, what about shelf stock, what about things, warranty parts, who do I get in touch with, how do I get in touch with them, all those pieces and parts of information. Additional information down the road, post-construction, what if I need to add 50 more employees in my place? What do I do? Well, that may represent what we call a material change. Most ESCO agreements, most ESPC contracts require that you alert the ESCO and say, hey, we're making this change. These people will be in a general market space, or we're adding a division that'll be here, or hey, we're adding a computer center lab, which uses a lot more energy, adds a lot more heat. Those things are important to consider with your new partner so that you make the best decisions possible. So recapping the steps, wow. Pre-project, have the right knowledge, understand what data you need, know what an investment grade audit should be so that you know what yours is. Understand the contracts, rules, rights, and responsibilities. Hey, get help. Get a third-party advocate that can support you with this. Use your institutional legal supervising authority so that we're all comfortable with the paper before we begin moving forward. Implementation, construction, you've heard me say it, incorporate your own. Make sure that you understand how the commissioning will be done, post-construction and warranty, so that you avoid any missteps that others may have had. And for post-construction services, you know what? A routine and a non-routine baseline adjustment is, in fact, precisely those scientific adjustments that are made to an M&V plan because there were changes in the facility. Gosh, Dale, you're telling me that you can apply science to these changes, see the math, know how they impacted the project and the savings? Yes, you can. Be diligent. Make those requirements. So then there's this question of what to record, report, and archive. And it's simply stated there, all of it, all the contracts, all the spreadsheets you're presented with to make decisions about, the investment grade audit, the contract, the witness report. Wow, meeting minutes, what was decided, checklists, who documented what. All this stuff is critically important. You know, before you may have built a wing on your building, general contractor came in. 13 months from now, you might need some of that stuff, but you might not need it. These projects typically have a multi-decade tail. They could be 10, 15, 20 years long. You may need this material ever so long. Please know that you saved it, you've recorded it, you've put it in a place where it can be accessed, not only by you, but those that follow you in your current role. Where do you put it? Well, you can put it on your laptop or maybe even a central computer in your agency. Maybe you put it in a file cabinet, hoping that you don't lose that over time. We hear people say, it wasn't that we lost the file, we couldn't find the file cabinet that had that stuff in it. Here's what we believe. There is a resource out there called eProject Builder. If you haven't heard of it, you should. For projects like these, it can do a couple of things, but one of the really important things is to document the summary information about the project and allow you to archive an incredible host of these reports, contracts, pictures, all the pre-construction, post-construction information. What a great resource. It's free, it's secure, it's provided by our friends at the Department of Energy. Now, we have done a deeper dive in this, as I mentioned, at GESPCU, the University of All Things Guaranteed Energy Savings Performance Contracting. And you can screenshot that and try to go find forums.energyservicescoalition.org, GESPCU. We will include it in a resources page that we're going to provide for you. But it's important that I share with you in the small amount of time that we had to share today, there does need to be a deeper dive, and it has been recorded for you. You can listen to it for 15 minutes at a time in your car. What a huge advantage this came about as an idea that DOE presented to us. How do you get folks to understand this in smaller chunks, bits and bytes? So we came up with the concept of GESPC University and encourage you to give it a whirl. Have a try. See what you can learn from it. It's really an important resource. You know, Dale, this all sounds too hard, but you know what? This is a tried and true process. $7 billion with a B, $7 billion worth of this is done in a year. So think about that. That's really an average project size being 4.5 million. That's about 30 projects in every state in every year. Wow, that means some of your neighbors are doing this all the time, one of which you'll hear from soon. There's nearly 50 years of doing this. Have there been some bugs along the way? Yep. Did you hear about a project that had some sort of conflict in it? Oh, probably. But you know what? That's what history does, is it teaches us to create remedies for those sorts of concerns. 50 years of history, tried, true, a well-vetted process. Are there national model instruments? You bet there are. Lots of program design, multiple resources available for you, and a veritable army of knowledgeable, capable expert providers. You know, the ESCO community is a broad one. Those folks, honestly, are experts at what they do. Nearly all of them. It's your job to find one that you think best suits you, but knowing how to make these modifications in existing operating facilities is a big deal. It's hard, it takes experience and expertise, and they're by golly good at it. A burgeoning industry of third-party owners reps. I don't know how to tell you how more excited I am about that. The word is that those may be available to you at the end of the year, that there be a certified list of third-party owners reps to be used across the nation, available for you, some of your neighbors right there in Texas. Wow, how cool would that be? So there are some other questions that generally pop up. So how long will this whole process take? Well, I always laugh and say, well, how big is a ball of string? I don't know. If it's a small project, a good investment grade audit may be a 2-month, 3-month, 6-month process. If it's a more sophisticated project, it may take a year. It may take a little more than that if it's more sophisticated, a larger campus. No harm in you asking the ESCO folks when you interview them, based on my facilities that I'm bringing to you in this market opportunity, how long do you imagine this might take? It's a great question. When will I start seeing the savings? Well, let's say it's a $4.5 million average size project. Let's say it takes you about 8 months to get through the IGA. It'll probably take you another month to get all the approvals signed, get the financing secured. You'll actually break the tape of starting construction. Things will begin to be implemented shortly thereafter, and you may begin to see savings right away. But once again, each project is a little different, so that what you want to have implemented first may not be the most energy efficiency producing measure. Just have in mind what each measure is when it's going to be installed, and an understanding of when you think you might be able to see that in your baseline representation of your utility bills. That's the best way to understand how you'll see the savings. How will a project implement or impact my day-to-day mission? Look, we live, work, learn in these spaces, and you're talking about doing work in them. Make sure you understand that up front. Maybe some of the work will be done at night, maybe some for an educational facility in the summer. Maybe while you are there, there'll be some reorganization of where people are. All important considerations to how to get the work done effectively. Won't I lose control of this process? Well, it should be your process, so I wouldn't if I were you. And finally, will I be able to make the future changes I need to make? Every time new people come into my space, we move around, we change where the offices are, everything gets reorganized. Won't that foil my performance contract? No. Just enter into the project in the partnership with your ESCO so that you report to them the changes that you make the changes, and you have the savings calculations reflect that every year in your annual measurement and verification report. We know that virtually everyone wants additional resources. When we talk about this stuff, we're going to provide a whole compendium of those resources to you. It's my understanding that our friends at NASEO are going to email that out to you from your registration email. We think that's the quickest, fastest way to help you get those hyperlinks so you can look at the information that's specific to Texas, and then these general resources as well. So do I think this can be done? You know what? I think success is just around the corner. The success of energy saved, the environmental stewardship you clamor for, the resiliency you need, the jobs created, the targets, the deferred maintenance reduced, healthier learning and working environments, all by leveraging this concept of paid for by savings projects through energy savings performance contracting. Certainly hope that our time together has been helpful for you. I've certainly enjoyed it. I'm sorry that we had a little technical glitch up front. Thanks once again for your attention, and we look forward to any questions when that time comes.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much, Dale. That was a really informative presentation. I know we do have some questions in the chat box. We will be able to address those at the end of the presentation, but we want to make sure our other speakers have a chance to speak before we move to the question and answer portion of our session. I'd like to turn things back over to Fred, who's going to introduce our Texas speakers for the session. Fred, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. So next, we're going to hear from a successful case study project on energy savings performance contracting here in one of our Texas state agencies. And this is at the Texas Facilities Commission. And the speaker is Farshad Shahsavari, and he is the Energy and Engineering Manager at the Texas Facilities Commission. His project has well, and I am hearing that he is actually doing some more projects with ESPC. So let me just go ahead and turn it over to Farshad. Farshad, are you? I see you there.
Yes, can you see me? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can see you. Yes.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Farshad Shahsavari. I'm the Energy and Engineering Manager for Texas Facilities Commission. Texas Facilities Commission is the main hand of the state of Texas for construction of state buildings. And we help other agencies if they have construction issues, if somebody doesn't know what we do. I started here about 8-9 years ago, and we were thinking of finding creative ways to do energy projects. And I had some background in a school district doing Lone Star projects with the folks that started put together this presentation. And we came up with this idea of using performance contracting, energy performance contracting, because we didn't have the funds. And I was lucky enough, I had the support of the management, especially one of our commissioners over here, Commissioner Novak, which is now our executive director. And so going back to what Dale was saying, I had to get everybody's buy-in over here, the procurement, legal, the accounting, and I needed that support from the upper management. So we started this thing around 2015, and we jumped into the water because the water was a little bit muddy, because we had a report in 2008 that didn't give a good picture of energy performance contracting. So we started the first project from 2008. So about 7-8 years of no performance contracting project for the state of Texas. This was the first one. And our first project was about 1 million square foot. And we close to 1 million square foot. And the total was 3.6 million. We applied for Lone Star loan. We received it from SECO. Our annual savings, guaranteed annual savings, was $485,000. The project was done by one of the, sorry, I have my phone music going off. By one of the energy performance contracting in the state that, they did a great job actually. And we are experiencing actually about $150,000 more in savings that was guaranteed for the last 3 years. So based on that successful project, we planned on having more projects. So we're currently finishing another one, which I'm gonna hand off to my partner, Vince Zubicek. He's with E3 Incorporated, and he's going to talk about our current project, which is ending. So this is our second project. And then we have 2 more starting up. And after that, we're going to have another 2, which, combine all these 6 projects. We're going to go completely check everything in our facilities, which is over 17 million square foot directly managed. Anyway, I'm going to hand it over to Vince to talk about our current project.
Thanks, Farshad. Yes, my name is Vince Zubicek, speaking here on behalf of the Energy Services Coalition. So ESPC Phase 2, the second project that TFC is doing is in its closing phases of construction right now. You can see the details on the slide. I won't go through each of those in depth, but you can see the general scope of work falls in line with what you'll typically see in an energy savings performance contract. The LED lighting is driving the way. You've got a project size of a little over $2 million. As the project is wrapping up, TFC is waiting for final completion so they can potentially get a very large utility rebate from Austin Energy. They have some great incentive programs. And so looking to get a substantial pay down of the performance contract through the rebate that the agency will be getting. And then importantly, the main thing that I wanted to talk just a couple minutes about is this phase 2 and then the future phases that Farshid and the agency is looking at are financed through the SECO Lone Star program, which I want to go through just really briefly for all the attendees on how that process works here in the state of Texas and how SECO, and our main point of presenting this is just to demonstrate how well a state entity like SECO has done a tremendous job to fit their financing programs very nicely within the needs of agencies like TFC, but also through the energy savings performance contracting process to just further entice state agencies and then cities, counties, school districts to use their financing program to get projects done. So real briefly, here's an overview of what the Lone Star process looks like layered on top of the process that TFC went through to procure and then implement their performance contracting projects within their facilities. And so you can see we've got a flow chart here that flows left to right, and then the middle goes right to left and then left to right. So TFC started with their normal procurement process, which was an RFQ per state statute. They interviewed companies. They made selections based off of that RFQ and interviews, and then required that the selected ESCO perform a no-cost preliminary energy audit of the facilities. They mandated that up front that would be done at no cost. And then that preliminary audit gets submitted with the Lone Star application. Again, Lone Star does allow you to reserve funds based on a preliminary energy audit, which again fits nicely within the ESPC process here in Texas. That's the application was submitted and the funds are reserved. Per the Lone Star guidelines, you then have 140 days to complete your utility assessment report, which again fits nicely with what a performance contracting firm will typically do with an investment grade audit or ASHRAE level 3 audit. That report is completed and then submitted to SECO for review. As Dale mentioned, there are a lot of oversight steps when you go with the Lone Star process and then with the ESPC process on top. So it really ensures that entities like TFC can get a good project implemented with many levels of oversight. Then with the fact that TFC is a state agency, SECO is also the overseeing authority to ensure that all of the performance contracting guidelines that they have built are met. And so all of that is included with the ESCO's contract and all those forms that need to be completed. So again, another level of oversight that state agencies have to ensure that it's a good project. Then you have the time where the ESCO agreement with TFC and the SECO loan agreement are both agreed to by TFC, by the state agency. So that's timed up well. Then you move into the process where post-contract, you'll have final design reviews by SECO with both the Lone Star process, and then project implementation will begin. There will be a monthly invoicing process during construction where TFC is reimbursed from the SECO Lone Star agreement during construction, so the project can be paid to the ESCO. And then you have a project repayment term that matches up with the energy savings that were provided with the UAR from the beginning of the process. And so again, our main point in outlining this is just that SECO has done a tremendous job in lining up their loan and their financing process with how performance contracting firms and state agencies would get these programs implemented. So it's been a good deal for TFC. It's been a good deal for other entities that have done it. Before I move to the next project, Farshid, would there be anything you would add on just kind of how the process has gone along for you?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to add that doing all of this work, we've done multi-million-dollar worth of work with 1 or 2 employees working on this in the huge state agency is almost impossible. So if we didn't have this process, funding and help of a ESCO like E3 and our other professionals, we pretty much couldn't do this in-house. So this provides you a way to do a lot of work with very minimal employees and funding.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And yeah, it's made even better by the fact that Farshid and his project manager, Lonnie, on these projects do have a lot of coordination that they go through on their side. And I point back to a slide that Dale had in his presentation about the ESPC team, that in part because of the process that SECO has put in place, Farshid is able to communicate internally, not just to his project manager, but to his finance department, procurement department, his commissioners, his historically underutilized business department, all to make that work. And that it's a very good process here put together in the state of Texas.
And one more thing I add, at the end of the project, we have the measurement and verification process built in, which we receive on the first project, we receive by annual, 2 reports per year that, shows our exact measured savings compared to the promised savings in the guaranteed savings. And on the first project, we are way exceeding the guaranteed savings. And that kind of, shows everybody how we are doing, what we are doing, and kind of creates more support in the agency.
Absolutely. And I'll let you wrap up, Farshid. I know you've mentioned, 2 phases of projects, 1 done, 1 finishing implementation. You've got 2 phases to come that I believe are in the process of getting submitted to SECO. So why don't you talk about those a little bit?
Yes, thank you. The first 2 projects, we almost covered close to 2 million square foot of our facilities. The phase 3 and phase 4, we just submitted applications to SECO for securing the funds, and these 2 projects are going to cover close to 2.5 million square foot additionally. And I'm hoping within a year or year and a half, we complete these 2 projects. And then right after, we are planning another 2 projects, which will cover another 2 million square foot. So within the next 2 or 3 years, we will have done close to, let's say, $20 to $30 million worth of work over 7 million square foot of facilities, maybe 8 million square foot of facilities, probably 7 million square foot of facilities, and savings in millions of dollars a year.
Absolutely. And I'll note as well, just as these future phases go out, TFC has such a large presence across the state. You're talking about remote locations beyond Austin, right? Many locations throughout the state where TFC owns property. Yeah,
on these 2 current projects that we're pursuing, we have, I think, 5 or 6 facilities across the state, in addition to about 10 facilities in Austin, Texas right now.
Absolutely. And so as y'all can see, that's the case study that we've got today, but definitely TFC has taken advantage of the performance contracting process to get needed improvements done in their facilities. And they've taken a phased approach over time so they can continue to see that success over each phase.
Again, I like to emphasize that these works that we are doing, and I'm getting some of the credit for good or for bad, it is impossible without the support from SECO, somebody like SECO, that provides the funding and set up all the procedures and standards and have the backbone to get our engineering review and some of the political backing that we need, plus professionals like WINS and E3 and other SPCs that they know what they're doing. We have engineers, project managers that we don't have access to, And this way of project management allows us to dip into all these professionals that we don't have access easily.
Absolutely. With that, I'll start sharing my screen now and give it back to the host.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Farshad and Vince. That was a great presentation here. For the rest of this, we do have a few questions in the chat box. So Dale, if you're ready, I'm going to kind of read these off to you one at a time. So the first question here is, taking a worst case scenario where you don't have metering in a building and no automated controls, is there a good justification for installing them as part of a performance contract?
Well, of course, it depends on the particulars of that facility, but by and large, I'd say the generality would be yes, that without any meter, that's implying that there's no utility meters, there's no consumption that gets paid to others. That would be my first look, is where's that meter? Past that, then there would be the question of, could I isolate some systems? Can I provide secondary, tertiary levels of metering and monitoring that would be more helpful in the process? Certainly, in many cases, that does provide an advantage over time.
Great. Thanks, Dale. So the next question here is about M&V. So how do you make sure that the M&V process is legitimate, especially nowadays with weather changes and COVID? ESCOs can use several methods of M&V until the one that would match the results would be picked. So what are your thoughts there?
Quite an interesting question. So the first thing that is the global sort of oversight and author of measurement and verification is an organization that wrote a set of standards called IPMVP, the International Performance Measurement and Verification Protocol. And within those protocols, there's 4 fundamentally constructions about how to measure and verify measures or the whole of a project. So they're labeled option A, B, C, and D. Option C would refer to using the whole utility bill. So while that is a way, it's generally only used, sort of only recommended, if most of the project, most of the facility is being touched. If in fact less than the whole of the facility is being modernized in some way, option A and B typically come more into play, where it's either isolating a single measure or isolating a system of measures. That to say, option A might be just measuring, if you will, the light levels and the power consumption of lighting devices before and after. Option B might look a little bit more like the chill water pumps, the chiller, the tower, a host of different devices aggregated together so that they're looked at as a system. So that, in its most primitive way, a description of IPMVP guidance, if you will. Back to the fundamental of the question, how do I know that it's being done right? Well, frankly, it is part of the reasons why we've pressed hard to try to stand up a third-party oversight group. Most of the ESCOs do a wonderful job creating M&V plans and can explain to end users how they'll be used to illustrate the savings that are accrued over time and how changes in the facility will be managed by science to illustrate the impact that they have. So most of that can be done that way. If you're a skeptic and you're concerned, then we encourage you to reach out to a third-party provider who can provide some additional oversight on concept.
Great, thanks, Dale. We do have a question here for SECO. So I guess maybe Fred, or if Eddie's on here, he can answer as well. So the question is about SECO's non-requirement for an energy savings guarantee and why you provide other contracting mechanisms that maybe avoid that guarantee.
All right, this is Fred. The State Energy Conservation Office offers a number of different funding methods. One of them is the Lone Star program, and that one does not have a guarantee. It depends on, it seems to me like what the individual agency or the owner wants. Certainly, the legislation and the statutes say that if a state agency is looking at energy savings performance contracting, that there has to be a guaranteed in the project. So again, it depends on a menu of things you would like, and that is a requirement for ESPCs.
Great, thanks, Fred. And Eddie, it looks like you have your hand raised, so I'm gonna allow you to talk if you'd like to provide an answer there as well. And you are muted, just as a heads up.
All right, Sam. Hi, this is Eddie Trevino at SECO. And what I wanted to just elaborate on is that we function primarily as a bank. So the borrower, in this case TSC, they select the contracting mechanism to use for their project. We have certain prescriptive guidelines that are required if they choose to use a performance contracting process, or if they choose not to, we also fund design bid build projects as well. We just have a prescriptive process as to how we review those projects. And we have a lot of technical support that we use that protects us in the process. And at the same time, by protecting us, it protects the borrower, in this case, TFC. So we're agnostic as to which way the borrower, which process the borrower wants to use. It's up to them to select the process.
Great, thanks, Eddie. A couple other questions here, and I think these are more for the Texas folks. So I think you mentioned material change, for example, adding people. It's not really so easy for the TDCJ to do that. When would we know we would need to add people after the investment grade audit? Isn't there a cost for the investment grade audit, and who pays for that cost? And then you mentioned providing an edge, for example, the diversity or safety factor. And did I hear you say that the percentage can vary per ESCO? So there's a few questions there.
Do you want me to answer that?
Sure.
Okay. I don't know if Fred wants to jump in, but basically we put the investment grade audit, which we call it UAR, on the ESCO, and they get paid for that by SECO. And then we review it, and then SECO reviews it through their technical assistance services. They send it to their engineer and they review it. So there's several layers of reviews. And as far as hiring a person, I don't know exactly what that question is about. I don't know if Fred, you want to jump in?
Well, I guess the thing that brings to mind, Sam and everyone, is I used to have another job. I worked for the city of Austin Energy, and we did I guess it was a $4 or $5 million ESPC project, and a big part of it was a lighting retrofit, converting all the traffic signal lights from incandescent 140 watt or 150 watt incandescents to 12 watts of LEDs. And it was like about an 85 or 90% energy cost savings. There, we could have, just included it as part of the contract with the installation, the retrofit company. In that case, we decided we wanted to do it in-house. And so we subtracted that from the scope of work and took all of the savings from that. That's the benefit, is that, the reward is you get to claim more of the savings from that. And you're using in-house staff to do that. But of course, you weigh that versus the savings.
Let me jump in there for a minute. In our case, honestly, we didn't have the technical backbone. I mean, I didn't have the time to do it, and we didn't have anybody else in house to do it. So we had to lean on the ESPC.
Great, thank you. Another question here. TDCJ has also done Lone Star projects, but for most of them, TDCJ has done this internally. How does using a third party benefit the TDCJ when we can handle the process by ourselves?
Okay, I think I can answer that. I've done Lone Star projects by themselves back when I was in the school district. And the difference is when you do it on just the Lone Star project on your own, you have to use different ways of procurement, and you have to go procure all the engineering, contractors. In my case, I had several engineers, and several, I mean, two or three, and then I had 2 or 3 contractors. Each one of them to procure them, to go through process of procuring them in every agency is like pulling tooth. So by having energy performance contracting, you hire one contractor, and through them, they hire all the subs and all the engineering, or they do some of it themselves. So it makes the procurement process so much easier. And in some sense, even though the energy savings performance contracting has a black eye of, hey, it's more expensive, maybe the project is a little bit more expensive at the end, but you'll save a lot of money hiring engineering separately, contractors separately. So it may, in some cases, it may be even less expensive.
Great. We do have another question here for Dale. So Dale, what are some examples of how novel resilience strategies can be valued in a performance contract if they aren't directly tied to utility savings?
Well, thanks for that question. It's certainly an interesting and timely one. There's been a lot of work done in how to combine things like solar panels or microgrids into performance contracts, because they're not really creating an efficiency as such. They're an alternate source in many cases of producing renewable energy. And to that end, actually the Federal Energy Management Program was first to create something called an energy sales agreement. I want to be very careful with that, because their energy sales agreement really combines a power purchase agreement. In other words, the ability to buy from that contained microgrid or renewable source and use that income stream difference between the cost of producing versus the cost of buying and incorporating it into a performance contract. It is not the ESA when people talk about energy services agreement or energy support agreements or any other way to use those terms. So presently, frankly, I was just alerted that we've received additional support to modernize some of the model documents that have been provided nationally for the last 20 years and updated a couple of times. And that'll be part of that modernization, is how to include those renewable microgrid resources that can provide resiliency, because that's become more important today than it was 15, 20 years ago in the course of these projects. So really good question. Thank you for that.
Hey, Sam, this is Eddie. On the TDCJ question, I think it's more of if they're looking at securing the services of a performance contractor, then they have to go through an RFP process or RFQ process to select the performance contractor. So it's different than your design bid build or your design build where you can base it on cost only. It's qualifications based, where you select the performance contractor, then you negotiate the price with the performance contractor, and then you get that investment grade audit done. So TDCJ would not be paying for 3 or more investment grade audits just to see who's going to provide the lowest cost. They would go through a qualifications based process first to select the performance contractor, and then once that contractor is selected, then they would go through a negotiations process related to pricing.
I want to jump in, after Eddie, to say that I've heard some agencies use RFP process, and they select several contractors to go do preliminary audit, and then they see who gives them the most efficient, and the most savings, and then they select that one. I don't think that kind of meets the statute of the state of Texas. And then you're asking a lot of people to do a lot of free work with no chance of in the future getting out of it. I don't think it's a good way of doing it. So we selected to do RFQ because there's engineering involved, and based on a statute, you need to go through RFQ process. So that's one thing I think everybody needs to be aware of, because there's engineering involved. You to meet the statutes, at least in Texas, you have to go through the RFQ process.
Thanks. And another question here, for the TFC phases 1 and 2, what percentage of the savings was from LED lighting upgrades?
Oh, good question. Okay, let me back up a little bit. We actually putting in solar panels in one of our facilities coming up in phase 3, I think, or phase 4, I'm not sure. And that savings from, we're almost 75 or 100% of our electricity for that facility is going to come from solar panels. And then because we have more savings from LED replacement on the other projects, the payback was 6-7 years, and the payback from the solar was almost 20 years, I think. But because the payback was so fast from the LED, it paid pretty much for the solar in our upcoming project. And going back on the LED retrofit, actually, I got most of the support for these type of work because one of our commissioners wanted me to pretty much transfer all our writing to LED within, my proposal was 8 years, but he pushed me to do it in 4 years. So we're going to transform everything from regular fluorescence to LED. I mean, we're almost 1.5 years into it. So another 2.5 years, 3 years, we're going to be all LED in TFC. And the LED savings are pretty good. I mean, the payback is within 6-7 years, doing it through performance contracting. And then we use those savings to do other stuff like controls upgrades, like mechanical sometimes work. But the actually bulk of our work we've done up to this stage been transferring the lights from fluorescent. The phase 1 was mainly going from T12 to LED, which had a lot of savings. So we had the controls upgrade added into the project and everything. The phase 2, we're going from T8 to LED, which is not as much savings, but we still get about 6-7 years payback from those projects. I hope I answered the question.
I think that was a good answer. Another question here, and this is actually pretty timely. Did you find that for your processes, what kind of slowed down because of COVID and the pandemic? Did you see any impacts there to your process?
Zero slowdown. Actually, the work went very well. We coordinated very well with our contractor, E3. Give them credit. They worked with us, all their subs, masked, coordinated with our property managers to get into the facilities. Actually, in some respect, helped because people weren't in the facilities, and they could easily access areas, and people weren't in their way, so they could work during the regular hours. So actually, it's pretty much some inconveniences, but overall, I think maybe it helped a little bit too.
Great, thank you. I think another question here, and this is for Seco. talking about the types of projects that can be financed, I think, through Lone Star. So they're asking about if we can finance a microgrid or energy storage, EVs or controllers or construction, or can all of that be financed? Just to kind of know what's out there that can be leveraged with Lone Star.
Good question. The criteria is that everything we do is behind the meter. So that means that microgrids are generally not part of a loan. The second thing to consider is that generally all of our improvements are permanently attached to the property, and again, they have to pay for themselves within their expected useful life of that measure. So if they make financial sense, they're permanently affixed to the property, they're behind the meter, then it's an eligible measure that we can talk about. Controls, a lot of times, are those are approved measures as a standalone, but sometimes they'll be part of an HVAC system. And so that's how they'll aggregate that HVAC system so that you look at it as one measure rather than a bunch of different measures. And a lot of borrowers will do that in order to try to get controls in a project if it doesn't pay for itself. Solar is another question we receive all the time. If solar's on the property behind the meter, it's going to reduce the consumption of that particular property, then yes, we can include it. If it's going to be for public consumption or part of a microgrid, then that answer would be no.
Great, thanks. So we do have another good question here. So for most projects, the state of Texas requires multiple bids. So the only way to see what the final cost for the project is to pay for an investment grade bid. So would that mean the TDCJ would need to pay for 3 or more bids to see who is going to provide the lowest cost, or 3 or more audits to see who provides the lowest cost?
I can answer that. How we, pretty much using the statutes, if we select the contractor through performance contracting, and they give us they give us their analysis and detailed audits, we review their cost estimate, and we determine that that meets, reasonable or not. And we made it clear at the beginning to all the contractors that we require them to get multiple bids from multiple subs, and if we don't like it, they have to go get another bid. So we try to make him get 2 or 3 bids at least from multiple contractors to do the actual work. And they do it, and so it's a lot less headache on us because they go get those bids for us. We just look at it and review it.
Great. And I think another follow-up question for Sika with what's financeable. And so if it's all about cost effectiveness, does this mean you can include revenue streams from like demand response, time of use rates, investment tax credit, or depreciation? Is there anything else in there that's kind of maybe outside the traditional ESPC ECMs that is possible to be financed?
Well, if you time of use rate programs are not part of the CEQA program. This is a capital investment program. It's not one where you can take credit for savings just because you change your energy contract. That's not a capital improvement. So you have to think about it in the terms of capital improvements. And we do allow hard cost operational savings if the hard costs can be documented, and those hard costs cannot be over 50% of a particular measure's savings, because at that point we view, if it's over 50%, we don't review it. We don't view it as a capital improvements project. It's a maintenance project, and so you got to think of everything in terms of capital improvements. So energy rates and demand, demand savings as a change, as a result of changing an energy contract, aren't counted as savings.
Can I jump in there for a minute? If the work needs to happen in a control system or commissioning to operate the facility so you can take advantage of different type of rate structure, I think that is covered by SECO. But just changing your contract is not. But if you have to do some sort of a commissioning and changing your schedule of operation or doing creative controls to take advantage of the rate structure, different rate structure, I believe Eddie needs to verify that. I believe that is covered.
Farsha, you bring up a good point. That's an existing contract, and you're taking advantage of an existing contract's rate structure. Is what you're doing by your commissioning activities. So that's okay. But creating a new contract,
that's not. Yeah,
that's not allowable.
Great. So I think just a general question for Farshad and Vince is through this process, what would you say were kind of the greatest challenges you had to overcome with this, or what are things that you want to make sure others are aware when you're going through this process, as potential obstacles to just kind of think through in advance?
That's a great question. I mean, the challenges. I mean, it took me 2 years just to get this airplane flying. I mean, the main challenge is get the support of the upper management for this. I think that's the first step. If you don't have that support, you're just spinning your wheels. After you get the support of upper management, your executive director, your commission, your board, the next step is get everybody educated and get in line. The first one is procurement, then legal, then accounting, the maintenance, the construction side, again, other middle management, because you'll find out a lot of people cannot understand this. And people that you think, very educated and very experienced, they still don't understand. So you sometimes hit your head to the wall trying to explain stuff, and you think you're explaining it well, but they don't get it. Especially okay, just this between ourselves, especially accounting. They have a really hard time of understanding this process. So you need to work on them. So you have to sell it in your agencies. And then you need to finally get one project and prove the concept. After you get the one project, prove the concept, it gets easier. So that's my recommendation. I like Vince to give you his side of,
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. I think Farshad summed it up pretty well. What I would add is kind of what he was alluding to is build time into the process, build time for the financial approval, build time for the legal approval, because all of them, you have to account for all of those stakeholders in each part of the process and make sure that you have time built in. Obviously with the state guidelines, and then Lone Star also build time in for SECO to provide their approval of the program as well. So it's just properly accounting for the time and making sure you've got that built into your process.
Hey, Vince and Farshad, would you think of one of the things that happens a lot in performance contract is, the client, the owner signs a contract and then they forget about it, thinking that the performance contracting company is going to, finish the job and just bring me in when it's over or whenever there's a question. I've found in my experience that there's a lot that you need to stay on top of it as a,
yes.
I see Farshad saying, yes, you have to stay on top of this, because if you don't, it could, something will slip and a little bit turns into a big thing and so on and so forth. So stay on top of the project. Don't just say somebody's going to take over.
Yes, let me follow up on what Fred said. If you don't, you need to have a somebody manage this internally, 1 or 2 or 3 people, I don't know, depending on the size of the project. I found out in our experiences, making the project way too big is going to get out of hand, because normally it's only me or somebody else helping me managing these projects. And so I'll try to limit it not more than 1 million square foot at a time, or around there. We have 2 projects that are 1.4 million square foot, but in that range, because access to the buildings, coordinating with property management, all the technical reviews you have to do, coordinating with SECO, coordinating with engineers, coordinating with contractors. And then you cannot just sign a contract and give it to, to the contractor and say, okay, go finish it. Because it's going to get out of hand really fast. You need to stay on top of it every step of the way to the end.
Sam, can I say one thing before we kind of end the meeting?
Sure, absolutely, Fred. Go right
I
ahead.
want to thank Farshad and Vince for their time to, present this successful case study and project. If anybody has any questions, I can follow up with Farshad, or you can get a hold of him directly. But I wanted to point everybody to the couple of things. One of them is that the Texas chapter of the Energy Services Coalition is 65, 67 members strong, and we're delighted, like Dale was saying, that this is one of very successful organizations, and we can help public entities, local governments understand energy savings performance contracting a little better. The other thing is that you'll have an opportunity to visit more with Farshad and Vince at the annual conference of the Energy Services Coalition happening in September 21st, 20th to the 22nd. And Farshad and his team are going to give a tour of a big project that he's doing, or his agency is doing, just in front of the Capitol. And so it's a tour. It's very exciting. There'll be videos and such. So look at our website, SECO, or the Texas chapter of the Energy Services Coalition for information on how to get to the conference. That's it.
All right, and I think we are about finished with this. So Fred, thanks for the closing remarks. I want to just see if either Dale or Eddie have any sort of closing remarks they'd like to add as well.
And thanks to Dale for a fantastic presentation. I always get something out of his presentation. So thank you, Dale.
Yeah, that was an amazing presentation. Can we get a copy of that presentation, please?
Yes, so we do have this as a recording, and we will be sending that out after the presentation along with, I believe, Dale's slides.
Perfect. I'd like to share it here in our agency.
So this is it.
Thanks,
This is
Sam,
it.
for the opportunity. I certainly want to thank NASEO and SECO for affording the opportunity for me to share some information with you all today. We're delighted to be able to provide the slides and the resources list that should be coming to you via email. So thanks again for that. And Fred, just so you know, that's why I change the presentation every time, just so that you'll say you learned something new.
I do. Thank you.
Thanks again.
And Sam, thank you. This is Eddie at SECO. Dale, excellent presentation. Farshad, thank you. Thank you both. And Vince, that was really well done. I appreciate you taking some time out of your day to share with us and help all of us. And I appreciate you being available for answering questions along with Fred, because I'm sure there are going to be more follow-up questions. So just a nice job, and thank you. And Sam, thank you for putting this together.
Absolutely. Glad to work with you as always, Eddie. Thank you everybody for coming and listening into this presentation. We hope you have a great rest of the afternoon and enjoy the rest of your week.
Sam, can we do this
yes.
again? Can we do this again next year or soon after?
We can certainly talk about it. Sure. Not a
Okay.
problem.
All right.
We'll be in touch.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of the day and enjoy the rest of your week. Good night.
Bye.
Thank you.